When subjected to a heavy cognitive load, humans with varying degrees of fluid intelligence display divergent neurobiological activation profiles. On the left, a synchronized whole brain network coordinates smoothly. On the right, the activity is isolated strictly to the frontal lobe, flashing erratically as it attempts to manage the same incoming data. Mapping the neurobiological signatures that separate these two phenotypes reveals the physical mechanics of fluid intelligence, the ability to reason and solve novel problems under conditions of uncertainty. Behavioral data shows a heavy statistical overlap between working memory capacity, executive cognitive control, and fluid intelligence. These variables are so tightly correlated that they share a majority of their statistical variance. The mechanism linking these traits is attentional control. The ability to purposefully direct attention mediates the relationship between raw working memory capacity and performance on complex cognitive tasks. These activation patterns suggest that fluid intelligence is independent of the physical storage capacity of specific brain regions. It functions as something other than a biological hard drive with a fixed megabyte limit. Fluid intelligence operates as an active, system-wide orchestrator. It manages the flow of thought and filters out noise in real time, determining how efficiently the neural network coordinates under pressure. This chart breaks down executive function into 3 distinct mechanisms and maps their variance overlap with fluid intelligence. Shifting between tasks accounts for 17% of the overlap. Inhibition accounts for 34%. Updating accounts for 80%. The continuous refreshment of relevant information in working memory is the primary driver of fluid reasoning. Problem solving relies on the brain's ability to constantly clear out old data and update the workspace with new variables. We can trace these 3 executive functions to a shared physical architecture. Neuroimaging isolates 3 specific regions activated during these tasks: the left middle frontal gyrus, the left inferior parietal lobule, and the anterior cingulate cortex. These 3 regions fire in unison whether the brain is executing a specific task, like inhibiting a reflex, or engaging in general fluid reasoning. They form a core processing loop. The primary obstacle this loop must combat is interference. Distracting information constantly attempts to overwrite the relevant data held in working memory. High fluid intelligence is characterized by a neurologically integrated interference filtering system. The sharper the filter, the clearer the reasoning. Working memory representations are often mistakenly described as being passively stored within the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Contemporary neurobiology indicates that while the dorsolateral and ventrolateral prefrontal cortices provide active maintenance, they do not hold the actual sensory data. Prolonged electrical activity in the prefrontal cortex during a delay period represents a continuous top-down control signal. The actual storage of data occurs elsewhere. These top-down signals route to the posterior sensory regions. The factual representations of working memory are physically buffered in the parietal and occipital areas at the back of the brain. During periods of high cognitive load, the prefrontal cortex blocks, filters, and suppresses distracting events. It projects signals backward to prevent new sensory input from overriding the data currently held in those posterior buffers. Cognitive capacity is limited by how effectively the prefrontal cortex protects the posterior brain from data corruption, rather than the raw volume it can contain. This protection mechanism operates through the multiple demand network. This distributed cognitive control system spans lateral frontal, insular, and parietal regions, defending against incoming interference. The parieto-frontal integration theory maps how fluid intelligence relies on variations across this distributed network. A brain's processing power is dictated by how efficiently these widespread regions integrate. This logic model illustrates 2 distinct interference control strategies. On the left is the high GF phenotype, which utilizes proactive control. The network anticipates incoming distraction and deflects the interference before it reaches the processing center. By identifying and deleting distracting information before it enters working memory, these individuals increase their available cognitive capacity. They keep the workspace clear of noise. On the right is the low G phenotype, relying on reactive control. Here, the interference is only addressed after it has breached the working memory buffer. The brain must exert energy to extract and discard the corrupting data after the fact. Under cognitive load, proactive networks adjust their connectivity. High G phenotypes decouple their control systems from the default mode network, which handles internal resting thoughts, while strengthening ties to the dorsal attention network to lock in external focus. As task complexity increases, low G phenotypes struggle with this coordination. They fail to extract critical task information, leading to a direct degradation in behavioral accuracy. Superior cognition relies on anticipating and deleting noise prior to processing. Intelligence is a matter of proactive structural coordination. We can measure the precise electrical signatures of these control strategies. Electrophysiological event-related potentials provide empirical proof of how efficiently a brain operates under stress. This graph compares EEG waveforms of two individuals completing an executive task, focusing on the P3 wave. The low GF line shows a massive electrical spike, while the high GF line remains smooth. This surge signifies neural inefficiency, the brain overexerting through localized frontal effort. High GF individuals avoid this electrical bottleneck. By offloading cognitive demands to distributed parietal regions, they distribute the workload and reduce frontal strain. These integrated networks also exhibit an enhanced frontal midline theta signal. This frequency sustains intense focus during high-load tasks without triggering massive, exhausting P3 exertion. The shift from prefrontal storage to active routing, proactive network coordination, and the reduction of localized electrical strain define the high GF phenotype. These brains use distributed architecture to maintain clarity under load. Fluid intelligence is the physiological agility to orchestrate distributed neural networks. The smartest brains don't work harder, they route better.